In the Impact segment tonight, what will President-elect Donald Trump do about Russia? As dozens of Russian diplomats scrambled to leave the United States after being given the boot by President Obama, Donald Trump still seems to be taking a wait-and-see approach to how he wants to handle charges that Russia hacked our elections. Here's what incoming Chief of Staff Reince Priebus told us on The Factor last night.
The president-elect put out a statement, and he said, look, it's time to move on to bigger and better things, but also, nevertheless, we're going to be meeting, and he's going to be meeting with intelligence officials next week to talk about this report and find out the details of exactly what happened, how the investigation took place, and maybe at that time or maybe later he'll have a response. But right now, we're just not in a position to sit here and respond to all of these details before we have a full-blown intelligence report on this particular matter.
But many observers say the evidence is clear as day.
17 intelligence agencies have determined that the Russians attempted to influence our elections. That is terrifying. And what's even more terrifying is that the incoming president wants to move on from this enormous geopolitical risk and domestic risk to the United States. That is really scary.
And Mr. Trump may find opposition from both Democrats and Republicans if he tries to reverse the president's sanctions, as many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle think they were long overdue. Joining us now from Jacksonville, Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and from Palo Alto, Ambassador Nancy Soderberg, who is a Deputy National Security Advisor to President Clinton. Now, both of you, before I ask one of you a question, I just want to make it clear, and this is the debate we keep having. Everyone believes that if Russia did, in fact, hack and affect the outcome of our elections, it's a bad thing and they need to be sanctioned. I'll start with you, Congressman, but don't we need to have the hard proof, the evidence first?
Well, I think it's also important to know what they're actually accused of. They did not hack into our voting systems. They hacked people's emails who were involved in the political process, like John Podesta. That's important. It's noteworthy, but it really follows a long string of cybersecurity attacks that they've been launching, that their agents have been launching against our government, against businesses for years and years. And now, all of a sudden, just as he's leaving office, President Obama issues sanctions, which I think really don't amount to much, because if you look at a lot of those entities, many of those entities don't even have U.S. holdings. So I think the practical effect of the sanctions will probably be very small. I think it's more of a symbolic act because there's a lot of outcry from members of the Democratic Party, and there's an attempt to tie what Russia did to Donald Trump's victory, saying that if Russia hadn't done that, somehow Hillary Clinton would be president. I don't think that's accurate, but I do think we should hold Russia accountable.
And I think we all do. So, Ambassador, your thoughts on the sanctions so far? I'll paraphrase here. Vladimir Putin has basically said, yeah, whatever, and promised not to retaliate right away.
Well, I think President Putin is hoping that he'll get a sweet deal from the incoming President-elect Trump, which I don't think is going to happen. This will be a bipartisan agreement that we had to stand up to blatant interference in our election, selective leaking, trying to influence the election and hurt Hillary Clinton. We don't know what the outcome of the election, how that was affected, but it was a blatant invasion of our sovereignty, and I think the President Obama has taken the right action. And I think it'll stand. The President Trump will look at it, but I think it was clearly the right thing to do. I wish it had happened earlier. But this is not the first time we've sanctioned Russia. There were some tough sanctions when they invaded Crimea, and it's a bipartisan issue. If President Trump decides to try and lift that, he'll have a very quick bill in Congress passed with a veto-proof margin. So these sanctions will stay.
Congressman, listen, I saw Senator Lindsey Graham and John McCain saying they were going to lead the push in the next Congress to increase the sanctions before they even, in fact, know what evidence that these 17 agencies allegedly have.
Well, yeah, and then I think it's also important to point out, I mean, Russia has taken so many actions during President Obama's presidency adverse to our interests. They sent advanced air defense systems to Iran. They made incursions into the Ukraine. They harbored Edward Snowden, who gave up a whole bunch of state secrets. So the Obama administration really did very little to combat a lot of that. And so now going out the door, he's trying to do this. So Congress, look, we're going to deal with it. I think there's always been strong support for holding Russia accountable. But I would note one of the things we did in this past Congress was authorize lethal aid for Ukraine. The Obama administration did not want to go down that road.
Okay. Ambassador, I'm scratching my head a little bit. So the sanctions were basically expel 35 diplomats and close down 2 what looks like to be consulates or embassies that they figured there may be some spying going on. I'm scratching my head because I'm wondering why we didn't do that 8 years ago if we knew it, or 6 years ago, or when we actually did know it.
First of all, I think we've taken very tough steps against Russia throughout the Obama administration. And I think the odd thing here is why Donald Trump thinks that President Putin is a good leader. He's a thug that's basically destroying his own democracy and threatening his neighbors. And I will put money on the fact that early on in the Trump administration, President Putin will test him. Maybe it's something with NATO, maybe it's something with the Baltics, and he will rapidly find out that this is a leader who does not share America's interests, and you have to consistently stand up to him. And so I think, in a way, this step by President Obama is a gift to the incoming Trump administration because he doesn't have to act on it right away. He can say it's happening. He may think he wants to lift those sanctions, and his new Secretary of State is on record as not liking sanctions, but I think they are a proportional measure to a very blatant hacking of our election season system. The impact we won't ever know, but I think it was an appropriate stance. And to go back and say President Obama has not stood up to Russia just simply doesn't relate to the fact that we've repeatedly sanctioned them.
The reason why that dialogue or that debate is going around is because of the 2 things. When he sent Hillary Clinton, when President Obama sent Hillary Clinton over there and promised a reset with the Russians, and then later on when President Obama himself said, hey, listen, after re-election, when I have more flexibility, we can work some things out, it didn't seem like there were a lot of teeth in the actions against Russia. Let me ask the Congressman this, though. The difference here, Congressman, going forward is Russia's economy is on the verge of collapse. Oil prices have almost ruined Russia. They're not in a position to get very tough with President-elect Donald Trump, and why would they want to, in fact?
Yeah, and my advice to Donald Trump would be, look at how Obama really bent over backwards to try to be nice to Russia, how they basically took advantage of that. Understand Putin's psychology. If you're strong and you're forthright with him, I think we can generate better outcomes. But I think when he sees weakness, that's what he preys upon. And if you remember the start of Obama's administration, one of the early things he did in 2009 was remove our missile defenses from Eastern Europe. That sent a signal, and I think Putin acted accordingly ever since.
Ambassador?
No, I just don't think that is not comport with facts, and Donald Trump is going to try a reset and find that it doesn't work either. So I think the Russian policy of this administration has been strong.
So, but Ambassador, I'm trying to figure out why you're so negative on this. What's your indication? I mean, Donald Trump.
Negative on what?
Well, on the incoming Trump administration. You said Vladimir Putin's going to test him, but you're saying that he didn't test Obama?
Donald Trump has repeatedly praised Vladimir Putin, who has invaded 2 of his neighbors, locked up his opposition, assassinated his opposition, and is a threat to many of the United States' interests in that region. We have to be tough with him, and that's what Obama has done. And President Trump can try and reset the relations, but
you're saying Obama has been tough.
Fit.
Meanwhile, all of these things have happened under President Obama. Ambassador, I got to go. Last quick thought.
I think you'll see a Donald Trump coming very close to reevaluating most of the statements he said during the campaign on Russia and getting real and being tough as well on a very ruthless leader, President Putin.
Very good debate, Congressman. Ambassador. Thank you.